Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. So, this is the continuation of that message that was sent to me by one of our admins of that dear sister who was saying that she went to Oman. The continuation of this story reads like this. Well, my brother, after posting on Facebook, I then went on the plane and I was really excited. Well, I arrived safely in Oman and was picked up by the host family. This is what they call them there in Oman. They are called host families. Where I was coming from, we used to call them clients, but it did not matter that much. When I looked at the weather, the environment, the weather was just okay, just like Africa. In fact, it was hotter than Africa. That was good. I said, I'm not going to have problems when it comes to adjusting. However, I never knew or suspected that my stay in Oman was going to be like hell on earth, and I was going to regret the day that I was born. Oh dear brother, I even regret as to what I was thinking the moment that I stepped my feet into the plane. To say that my stay in Oman was terrible would be an understatement. It was like hell on earth. Firstly, the weather was terrible. It was too hot for my liking, and I had severe sunburns. The first night that I arrived in Oman, the host family then went on to confiscate my passport and my phone, saying that it was their insurance that I would not run away until I would have paid off my debt to them. They said that they had used a lot of money. That meant consult fees and airfares. I was supposed to repay them. This was a lot of money. Taking my passport away from me was to ensure that if the thought of me running away will ever cross my mind, I'll never try to do it, as I'll be traveling without a document so far away from home. Africa, it is far much better because you can blend in amongst your fellow blacks, but in another country whereby they are of a different color, you feel really not at home. Taking my phone away from me was to ensure that they will cut me off from the rest of the world. And then the treatment, it began. They started treating me like I was a lesser human. My work in Oman was terrible. I was a house help, a nanny, pet minder, cook, all in one, and any other duty they thought of. I was the first person to wake up each and every day and the last person to go to sleep. Day in, day out, I worked close to 17 hours per day with just only one meal to sustain me. The house was quite huge, and in it they lived about 3 generations of the same family, from the aunties to the uncles, the children and the toddlers. It was my duty to make sure that their laundry was done and that their stomachs were always kept full. One mistake, I would have insults thrown all over me. I was called a monkey. The job drained me emotionally and physically, but where was I going to run away to? There was nowhere to go. I was kept as a prisoner and not allowed to go out of the courtyard. The lady of the house, well, she was not hygienic, or maybe she did what she did to fix me. I have never seen an untidier person than her all my life. Whenever she went to take a bath, she would leave her clothes scattered all over the place for me to pick. Even her menstrual pads and tampons, she would leave them on the floor for me to pick them up and clean after her. All these without any protective gloves as well. All this hard labor, I was not receiving any payment for it because they claimed that I was still owing them and I was paying their debt off. How was my mother and son coping when I was not sending any money for their upkeep? I felt like I was slowly losing my marbles because I was also underfed. I started to lose weight as well. 1 month passed and the patriarch of the family started making frequent trips to my sleeping quarters. I resisted his advance, but The moment that I resisted his advance, I still remember it was on a cold night. It was about to rain. There was a storm that was approaching, thunder and lightning. I was quite terrified because being in an area whereby it is more like a desert, when the storm is approaching, you can feel it because there are no trees, nothing to block it. So the weather was really terrible on that night. That was when that man entered again for the second time into my sleeping quarters. He entered as if I was one of his wives, and on that night he was not wearing anything. He just had this other bathing towel that was wrapped around his waist. I tried to resist his advances, but he punched me. He punched me so hard, and he said that I was nothing but a slave to him. The patriarch seemed to be enjoying when I was crying out for mercy. This was like the thing that was actually turning him on. The more that I screamed for mercy, the more that he found pleasure in everything that he was doing to me. Brother Nashi, when you see those videos of women that will be having intercourse, like using the other way, like seem to, you can think that those women, they are enjoying it, but they are only doing it for the money. If you are forced to do such a thing, that is when you will see that having intercourse is like the most painful thing that can ever happen to you. Well, that man, the first night, he took some lube and he placed the lube all over the seam too, so that I won't feel pain, but the pain was there. This was like the first time. The next night, he just wanted me to scream out of pain. He did it, Brother Nashi, when I was dry there, down there, because the pain was just too much. Whenever I would have what they call the anal tears, he kept on doing it to me because I was more like a prisoner. Before I could heal, the man will do it to me over and over. Oh, how painful it was, but it was not much of a help whenever I would try to beg him not to keep on doing what he was doing to me, because he was actually enjoying my pain. That man, he was such a sadistic man. The patriarch had invited a doctor to his house and he had injected me with some drug. I think it was to prevent me from ever falling pregnant, having a child. I think with a black woman in their country, it is totally forbidden. I think maybe it is more like an abomination to them. The injection, it then stopped me from ever going to my periods. However, one day my menstruation just came from nowhere. The patriarch, as usual, came and he forced me, and that night I was bleeding. I received a beating. He shouted, "You are just a horrible person." He shouted at the top of his lungs, "You have defiled me. You have defiled me." I didn't know that in their religion it is forbidden to be intimate with a dirty woman. He said that you are a dirty woman. How dare you defile me? And this he said as he was striking me with the back of his hand. He said that he was not allowed to be intimate with me. He said, "What have you done? What have you done, you monkey?" The man was livid and angry. He was hitting me with anything that was within his reach. I remember seeing myself lying in a pool of blood and his wife screaming on top of her lungs, but no one dared to tell him to stop. They were taught to be submissive, and this is what the madam had told me. I was supposed to be submissive. Since I was more like a slave, I had to be more submissive. If you wanted to walk around with a chain tied around my neck, this is what I was supposed to do without ever complaining. I remember waking up the following morning, and in the month that I had lived with them, I had never received a day off, a day to recover even. They even called their doctors, and when he came, he gave me a concerned look. He shook his head, but he did not say anything. Maybe they thought that I was not going to make it and die. Dying to them, I think it was not an option, as I was an investment. All that they were concerned about was like the money that I was owing them. Yo, dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our admins. We received this message. It was sent to us by one of our dear listeners. Strange things do happen in this world.